Hey, good morning. It's Jim Dodson, the Florida Bike Guy. I'm a bicycle injury accident lawyer in Clearwater. Welcome to our live stream. We've got an exciting guest for you today. If you have any interest or curiosity or concern about the growing and expanding trail system and how it's going to affect your local area, we have the guest who's going to answer all those questions. We've got Dale Allen, who is the president of the Florida Greenways and Trails Foundation.
Hey,
Dale,
Jim.
why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about the foundation?
Thanks, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you very much for inviting me. The Florida Greenways and Trails Foundation is the state's leading advocacy organization for connecting our local bicycle trails together into a statewide and regional system. This effort has been underway seriously for about 5 years now, and I'm thrilled to tell you, Jim, that the response to this statewide has been really quite phenomenal. The need for safe transportation corridors for bicycles is critical in the state of Florida. And not only is these connected trails improving the safety of the average bicyclist who wants to be outdoors and enjoying our year-round weather, but it's also generating a lot of interest from the tourist development councils. Florida is a destination state, and this is another major asset that we're going to be bringing to the global marketplace.
Well, it's pretty fascinating to me. For those of you who don't know, Dale is a volunteer. So this is a volunteer organization. He does have his travel expenses paid for, but they are substantial. I think you've done 100 presentations in the last couple of years around the state.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
He's based in Tallahassee, which today is a pretty cool, weather-wise place to be.
Beautiful.
So Dale, talk about, I know that this all germinated out of the concept that we had some pretty significant trail segments that were already in place. I'm down in Pinellas County. We had the Pinellas Trail, which is probably one of the oldest large trails in Florida. So tell me how the idea of connecting these trails, becoming a system, worked, and how that has germinated into what it is today.
Oh, great question, Jim. Thank you. Yeah, the trail movement actually began about 30 years ago when our great railroad system began to be abandoned wholesale. And the first trail that was ever created was in Tallahassee, Florida, the Tallahassee to St. Mark's Trail, about a 16-mile connector. But shortly thereafter, local governments started getting into the act, and the Pinellas Trail was the first major urban trail in the state of Florida. And it's also on an old abandoned railroad corridor that the county acquired. There have been other trails converted like this over the years, and when we in 2010 and 11, there were over 60 local trails in the state of Florida, but none of them were serving for transportation purposes. They were extremely important from recreational points of view. People love their local trails because it's a safe place for people to ride during the entire year in Florida. But you really couldn't get from the Pinellas Trail anywhere outside of Pinellas County. And what we decided to do was to raise the visibility of all that we'd accomplished with the 60 trails statewide by telling a slightly different story. And we began to tell the transportation story in Central Florida. And we chose Central Florida because it had 14 existing trail segments: the Pinellas Trail, the West Orange Trail, the Good Neighbor Trail in Brooksville, the Suncoast Trail, but they were all in pieces, segments. And we began to say, you know, if we could just close 7 gaps between these 14 trails and link them all together, the Atlantic Ocean at the Canaveral National Seashore, Playa Linda Beach, all the way across Florida, and now end up in downtown St. Petersburg on the waterfront next to the Salvador Dali Museum. And all of a sudden, a light bulb kind of went off in a lot of state officials' eyes. They began to understand this as a transportation endeavor more than just a recreational endeavor. So the Coast to Coast Trail, I think, is the first one I ever met you about. And it was designed to connect, thus the name, the Coast to Coast Connector Trail, connect those 14 trails together into the first ever long distance trail in Florida, a trail that is being built right now. And it'll be 250 miles when it's completed. We're down to about 40 miles of gaps in the system. I think you can see now on your screen most of that trail. It's the trail that's marked in blue that goes from the left-hand side of your screen in Pinellas County, connects across to the Blue Trail in Brooksville, and then eventually all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. Where the circles are on that map, you can see where the major gaps were. There was a major gap, the Pinellas Trail at the north end in Pasco County. That's now almost closed. There was a major gap between the Sill and Brooksville. That's under development right now. And then the other trails as you come from west to east, there's active work going on in all those trails. In fact, there's another major dedication scheduled for December 20th in Volusia County. So the trail is now being built, connected, and probably within another 2 years, it's going to be almost 95% complete.
So just put that in perspective. So how far can someone today travel on that trail nonstop?
On the coast to coast, the long continuous segment is about 45 miles.
Okay.
When Pasco and Pinellas connect together, which will happen in this year, 2019, you'll be probably close to about 100 miles of connected trail.
All right.
When the Brookings connects, we'll be up to about 150, and then when it's all connected across, it'll be 250. It will be the longest continuous paved off-road trail system in the Southeast.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. So talk about these urban trails obviously began in the urban centers, what is there's a unique transformation taking people from urban to rural. Talk about that and what is required to kind of make that happen.
Yeah, what's going on, Jim? If you'll notice from the map we just had up, most of the gaps are in the rural areas of the urban counties. Right. North Pinellas County is the most rural part of the whole county. From the county's point of view, they were almost done with this trail. They only had 3 more miles to go before they got to the Pasco County line. So they weren't really focused on the importance of that 3 miles until we brought them and said, well, yeah, but you can't get out of Pinellas County. If we close that 6-mile gap, all of a sudden now you can get almost all the way to Brooksville and the Withlacoochee State. That appealed to a lot of bicyclists who enjoy the Pinellas Trail, but it's up and back continuously. This opens up a world of other places you can ride to from Pinellas County. So the rural areas are the counties that really need the most assistance right now. Most rural counties don't even have county parks departments, who by and large in the urban areas are the managers for these trails. They're the ones who keep the trails clear, keep the bathrooms clean, up the trash, all those pedestrian things that make such an importance on the trails. Rural counties just don't have that. And that's one of the things we're hoping to during the Florida legislative session is trying to find a matching grant program for the rural, get them up to speed with the urban areas.
All right, you've mentioned legislature. So something major happened in trail construction 2 years ago when you got some recurring funding. Talk about that and tell us about what it cost to build a trail. How much does it cost per mile to put a trail in, with or without the right of way? Yeah,
the average cost of these trails, if we own the land corridor, like if we're building a trail within a road right of way where the county or the state already owns the road, runs about $500,000 a mile. And you've got to build the bed, make sure that it drains, the trail doesn't flood during heavy rain events, and then you've got to pave it. So it's about $500,000 a mile. And for a 12-foot wide trail, it's actually cheaper than a lot of sidewalks, okay, because the materials that are required are not so expensive. So about $500,000. If you don't have the right of way, purchasing the right of way, and that can double the cost of these trails. In some of the urban areas where land is expensive. But at the big event part of your question, in 2015, after a couple of years of educating the state elected officials, the legislature passed a significant piece of legislation called SUN Trails, SUN Trails. And SUN is an acronym for Shared Use Non-Motorized. So these are designed to be regionally connected bicycle trails. And they embedded in the legislation $25 million from the State Transportation Trust Fund to build these trails. And they said, DOT go forth and start connecting all these local trails together into a statewide system. And the map that's on the screen now is kind of a quick and dirty shot of what we're talking about here now. The state has a master plan, and you're looking at it on the map image here. That master 15 long distance regional trails, the coast to coast being the number one. And on this map is that blue trail that comes across the center of the state.
Right.
But you can see that there are trails. There's a pink trail right above the coast to coast. That's what we call the Heart Florida Loop. That trail is about 60% done.
Right.
Then there's a yellow loop trail. That's the loop trail. It's also receiving state funding now. It will also be over 200 miles in length. So you can see right in Central Florida, we have 3 long distance loop trails that are more than 50% finished, but they're still all in pieces.
Right, right.
So within the next 5 to 10 years, most of these loop trails there will be substantially connected and available to the bike riding public. The other 2 big trails that you asked me about are down in Southeast Florida. The one coming down the Gulf Coast, Pinellas County through Tampa, all the way to Naples. That's generating a lot of interest in Lee and Collier and Sarasota County. In fact, in Sarasota County, just this last November, the county voters approved a multi-million-dollar bond issue to acquire the remaining CSX corridor right-of-way to connect the Legacy Trail all the way from Venice to downtown Sarasota. And so that piece is being built with local government monies. On the east coast of Florida, from where the coast to coast goes through Titusville, those counties along the Florida Southeast Gulf Coast, they're all in on this. And they're actively working. Palm Beach, Broward, Dade County, Martin County, they're all actively looking at their trail maps and working to build those trails. So with these 5 trails completed, Florida could very quickly move from being the most dangerous place in the United States for bicycles to one of the most desirable places in the United States for bicycle traffic. And that is not lost on our tourist development councils and chambers of commerce. They have been avidly supporting this work.
So talk about some of the impact for municipalities and for the state that a real effective built-out statewide trail system would provide.
There are 3 big benefits for these trails to the local governments. Number one is it provides a safe place for bicyclists to ride and enjoy bicycling again. Okay, when I was a kid growing up, I lived on my bike, but the roads were a lot safer then. Okay, I ran a paper route when I was 10 years old on my bicycle. You know, at 10 years old, it's not really possible to do that these days. Okay, right. Building a bicycle system that functions as transportation and is safe for the average bicyclist, not your roads sophisticated bicyclist, but your average family bicyclist, is a huge thing for the people. If we get people out and riding their bikes again, we're going to have a healthier population. And the most telling statistic, Jim, that I'm aware of is that Floridians love their bicycles. 9 out of every 10 households in Florida report having at least 1, if not more, bicycles. Only 1 out of 10 use them. And when you ask them, why don't you use them? The roads are too dangerous. So this addresses that concern. So if people once again feel safe and start riding their bikes and can go places, they're going to start going to work. They're going to start to go to state parks. They're going to be active in the outdoors. And what a climate we have for that, right? Our very flat topography all of a sudden could become our greatest asset. You know, we're not riding mountains here. We're riding fairly level topography. So safety and health. But the third one, and this is not insignificant, all over the nation where communities have invested in these trails, the economic payoffs are huge. You know what happened to Dunedin, Florida on the Pinellas Trail. 30% down.
Titusville.
Yeah, all these, but Winter Garden on the West Orange Trail, they've become extremely desirable places to live. And one of the funny statistics that I became aware of on the Pinellas Trail is when the trail first went in, people felt so threatened by the trail, they had built fences between their backyards and the. Now, if you go down the trail, it's a rare house that doesn't have a gate, so they can get out on the trail. Okay, so the image of these trails as places that are crime-ridden and dangerous has turned 180 degrees to having a trail in your backyard will increase your house value 10 to 15%. Imagine that.
Now subdivisions are being advertised as having access.
That's right. That's what the realtors are all looking for. So safety and economic prosperity and redevelopment of some of our neglected downtown urban areas are the big three.
When we were talking the other day, I think you made the analogy to Wisconsin, which is only they ride up there 6 months of the year. They've got a sophisticated trail system. And what's the economic benefit to the state up there?
Well, remember, they've only got 6 months of summer at best up there. So that's really the primary bicycle season is 6 months. But that 6 month bicycle season generates $1.2 billion worth of economic activity for the state of Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Imagine Florida, which is already the #1 biggest tourist destination. We're told by Visit Florida that one of the questions most frequently asked of visitors coming to Florida, where can I be active in the outdoors? And the answer is, well, you can go to your state parks and hike some of the trails, but that's, and some of the regional parks and local parks, but you can't get on your bicycle and go great distances in Florida without being on the road system.
Right.
And, and when you get on the road system, you unfortunately, as you know, painfully well, the roads are not safe for bicyclists. We've had recently 3 or 4 more bicycle fatalities in Southeast Florida. It's from the distracted drivers and too many people on the roads, I guess.
Right. So we talked about the convergence of what's going on. You really don't have sustained opposition to what we're doing, the trail construction. You've really got the Chamber of Commerce and AAA and some other big players who've kind of gotten behind this and are really supporting the expansion of trails. Talk about how that's helped and what you're looking for to do in terms of the legislative session coming up to try to get more money. Yes,
the big missing piece in converting Florida from the most dangerous state for bicyclists to the most desirable is who's going to be responsible for managing those once they're built. Florida DOT has been very clear. They are willing to build these trails and make them as safe as they can possibly engineer them. But the day-to-day upkeep of the trail, keeping them free of glass and debris, making sure that the bathrooms are open and closed and clean, making sure that trash is picked up so that these trails stay amenities for our community and don't become eyesores. That burden is falling on local governments, okay? Right. Local governments, if they have the resources, like Pinellas County is very fortunate. You have an amazing parks department in Pinellas County. Hundreds of staff devoted to keeping your parks clean. They're doing a brilliant job in Pinellas County, keeping the trail up. But you go to a more rural county like Sumter County or Hernando County, oftentimes they don't have parks departments. And so they are struggling with this. They want the trails. They don't know how to maintain the trails and manage them. One of the biggest criticism, and perhaps the only criticism the trail community gets, is that there's no dedicated fees that the bicycle community pays that supports all this. There's no registration fees on annual bicycle tag that you have. There's no way to collect money. And because the bicycle trails are so porous, there's so many roads that intersect them, we never want to see a fee for riding on our trails. But we haven't solved the problem yet of how funds are generated locally to maintain these trails. As a result, when local government gets into period, upkeep and maintenance of the trails is one of the first things it's got. Once the trails are not maintained, they quickly become less desirable potential eyesores in a community, and we don't want that to happen. So we're in the legislature with a request for some state funding that will be used hopefully through the Department of Economic Opportunity or through DEP or one of the other state level agencies, matching grants to local governments to build more trailheads, public access facilities, and to be able to manage the trails that they got and the new pieces that are being added to the system every month. That's these days. That's the biggest challenge we've got right now.
Right. So, and you've talked to me about the fact that you've gotten a lot of support. You know, businesses got behind it, AAA's got behind it.
Yeah, the business community sees these trails as a tremendous asset in their communities. There's no convincing them of this. These trails are a major infrastructure project for the state of Florida, and they're being viewed like that. We don't have adequate signage on a lot of these trails. When trails connect, people may not know which way to go on the trails because you may cross a road, and intersect a sidewalk, and getting lost. So there's no funding for that, all that stuff. We know that trailheads should be spaced probably about 10 miles apart for the bicycle community because of our summer thunderstorms. You're very exposed when these storms come up fast and you're out there on the trail. You need a place where you can go and get into some shelter. We're not organized at that level yet. There's no funding source for all that. So again, the legislature has been very supportive of all this. They don't like the idea of Florida being known as the most dangerous state in America for walkers and pedestrians and bicyclists. But we don't have yet the fully developed system for how to both build the trails and maintain them and market them yet. But that's what we're working toward. Okay.
All right. That's terrific. So I think one of the things you told me that was surprising, you know, as cyclists, we assume we're the ones using the trail, that we're the number one user of these urban trails and these trails that are connecting with the more rural areas. And that's simply not the case.
Yeah, I was very surprised to learn that at a trails conference a couple of years ago. They actually went out and counted it, and it turns out that bicycles only represent 20% of the trail users. The pedestrians, by far and away, are the largest users of these trails. And that means everybody. People walking for exercise, elderly especially, love the trails because they can get out without worrying constantly about being struck by a car. Mothers with strollers, one of the huge users out there, you know, trying to recover from birth and they're out there exercising with their babies. Handicapped individuals, mobility impaired people love these trails. Kids use them to get back and forth to school these days. You know, like in the old days, we used to ride our bikes to school, but now the roads are too dangerous, so we have trails for the kids. Rollerbladers, trail skateboarders, just all the new kind of people propelled vehicles that are showing up in our cities. Scooters are a huge new coming. So those are all the people that are out there using these trails. And one of the things that DOT is finding out and chambers of commerce are finding out is that these trails are full of people. Pinellas County, I think it's up to 60, 70,000 people a month on the Pinellas Trail. Well, over that's almost 1 million users over the course of a year. And businesses are following that level of traffic and volume. And it's freeing up capacity on the roads. So it's making actually the street safer for the motorists. They're not constantly dodging things or pulling out of their lanes to get around things. Now, having said that, I think our roads should still be engineered to be safe for bicyclists. You know, bicycle community has every right to be on those roads as the motorists do because they're a moving vehicle. But the reality is that 9 out of 10 Floridians won't do that. They won't go out on the roads to use them without something like a trail. They're simply not going to use their bicycles.
Well, as you know, for a lot of people watching this program are probably more long distance cyclers, the recreational cyclers, the more serious recreational cyclers are putting in mileage. A lot of people are going to use the urban trail to get to the rural area to do the extra mileage. They want to do the 50, 60 mile ride. And this is what the big advantage of all this connection going on. You know, you leave Pinellas County and go up to Pasco County, for instance, north of us. It's gorgeous up there because there's nobody around.
That's exactly, and that's the next big piece. You just put your finger on it. Think of the Sun Trail system that we just talked about that the legislature created and now DOT is building. It's kind of the interstate system for bicycle transport in Florida. what showed up on the map, if it's when it's finished, and probably it's going to be 30 to 50 years, you'll be able to bicycle from Pensacola to Key West, all off-road. Now imagine that. But like the interstate system, if that's all we had, it wouldn't work. We still need to get from our communities where we live and our towns to where we really want to go. And that may mean we want to get on a piece of the regional trail, but we got a connection before we get on the regional trail and after we get off the regional trail to be able to get to it. So someone coming off of the coast to coast trail may decide they want to go to Blue Springs State. Well, to do that, they got to get on the roads. So we're looking at this next phase. Once we get the regional trails connected all over Florida, 15 of these regional trails built, then how do we move? How do people really want to travel in the system? And it's from downtowns to destinations. Right. And when we get to that point, we're going to start looking like a lot of the communities in Europe, because the numbers of riders get to be in the millions.
Okay. Yeah, and that's come.
If we can do it, that's next.
Yeah, exactly. So, Dale, there's a lot of people that will have access to looking at this program. What would you tell them the number one thing that they can do to make the biggest impact on making trails, creating trails, and making riding safer for them as cyclists?
Well, we have a web page. The foundation has a website which has a lot of these maps on it. So probably step one, if you're not, would be to go to our website and research the maps and become familiar with it. That's just education. The most important thing they need to do is contact officials, both their local elected officials and their state elected officials. So their state senators, state representatives, and tell them how important these paved trails are to their community and to them. It doesn't take a lot of voices, and we're talking here 2 or 3 dozen people that if they were to pick up the phone and call their state representative and say, I'm an avid bicycle rider, you know, people come to Florida wanting to ride these trails, I need you to support additional funding for our state trail system, that would have a huge effect. So I'm asking, you know, 3 dozen of your viewers today to do that. Just contact their local elected officials, contact their state representatives, make them aware of how important this is. That's 10 to 15 minutes. You'll have a huge impact. If you need assistance doing that, the best source is, I believe, the Florida Bicycle Association, FBA. Florida Bicycle Association has been working for many, many years to make our roads safer. They fully endorse the statewide trail system. And so as they work to make our roads safer, they're also lobbying for more support for our trails. So go to FBA, Florida Bicycle Association, contact them, get them to help you, and ask FBA with letter writing or other things that they're doing. FBA is the place to go.
So I want to follow up one more plug for the FBA. Of course, I'm on the board of the FBA, been there for many years, and our executive director, Becky Alfonso, is really well regarded. Tell our viewers how regarded Becky is in terms of her legislative work on behalf of
Glad to do so, Jim. Yeah, glad to do so. Over the last 3 years, Becky and the Florida Association have become well known in Tallahassee as a credible source of information, a very responsible group in terms of their advocacy work, and extremely knowledgeable on the issues. So they were behind the move over legislation, the texting legislation, the law that was passed from hit and run drivers. I can't remember the name of that legislation. It was named after the gentleman who struck a motorist, and the motorist fled. And because of FBA's advocacy, that law standardized the punishments across the board, so that it was a misdemeanor, I believe, if you struck a motorist and fled, opposed to a felony if you struck a motorist, the bicyclist, and fled. Now it's a felony. So all that work has been tremendously powerful. And the bicycle groups that are members of FBA are feeling the benefits of this, because FBA's advocacy is affecting the whole state of Florida and affecting the safety of all the bicycle clubs in Florida. So if you're a member of a bicycle your club isn't part of the bicycle, fix that. Join up, because their strength in numbers is significant, and the bicycle community has not had the significance that it's entitled to in Tallahassee, because we haven't been well organized, but we're getting very well organized, and FBA is leading that charge.
Yeah, and Becky's putting together a coalition of legislators who are bicycle advocates, and I think our viewers, you mentioned the other day when we spoke that there are people that have been recently elected to the legislature who are really serious cyclists. There's some competitors. There's other people that are serious cyclists. They may not list it on their resume or their bio, but if cyclists connect with them and make that connection, it can make a huge impact.
Absolutely. In fact, that's what triggered all this. I'd gotten a chance to go in and see the incoming Senate president in the 2012-2015 legislature, Senator Andy Gardner. He was the incoming Senate president, and I thought I was going to get 5 minutes in his office. And as I explained this coast-to-coast trail and what significance it was going to have for Florida and his district, next thing I knew, it was an hour. And I said to Senator Gardner, "Senator, you're extremely interested in this. Can I ask you why?" And he said, "Oh, I'm a triathlete. I ride these roads. I know it's really true." And there was no looking back. I mean, Senator Gardner became our champion. And next thing I know, a lot of these young incoming Republican legislators, they're very competitive athletes. And they run long distances. They're avid outdoors people, and they love bicycles. And maybe in the years to come, they'll put that on their resume as being the most significant attribute they bring to the legislature. But many of them yet don't do that. But we're working to change that as well.
Well, and it's interesting too, because these random, like that conversation with Senator Gardner and what you learned and the connection you made was really kind of unexpected. And that's the serendipity of having just a small number of people who make a strong connection with someone on their local team. What a huge impact that makes. It only takes one or two people who lead the charge. People aren't opposing. They need to be led, especially in the legislature. They need to be led, and one or two strong leaders will take charge of this.
That's exactly right. And that's what FBA is doing, and that's what the foundation, our role mostly has been to articulate, what we need to do, and then let the membership-based organizations like FBA and the Rails to Trails Conservancy, let them carry the weight to the legislature, because they can activate 5,000-10,000 emails on an issue like this once we're all focused. So I really appreciate you doing this, Jim, because this gives me a way to reach a broader audience. And if just 3-4 dozen people sit down and do something, this incoming legislature will respond. I can promise you that.
That's tremendous. So Dale, I want to thank you for joining us today. And the work that you have done, you continue to do, that the foundation does, is so invaluable. I'm just so enthralled to hear you talk, and the enthusiasm that you bring to this project. I know why it's infectious to those that you deal with as well.
Well, it's a joy too. And I tell you, just one last personal story, and then we can sign off. I go to yoga classes to try to keep fit and limber as I've grown. Part of yoga that I have is sitting still and closing my mind and just emptying my mind and meditating. I found that I do my best meditating on my bicycle when I'm moving, rolling down the trail. When I'm safe, my mind opens up and I do my best thinking when I'm pedaling. So there's a huge benefit there that we haven't even talked about.
Another conversation.
Next conversation.
So thank you so much, Dale. This is Jim Dodson. I'm known as the Florida Bike Guy. If you don't know me, I'm a personal injury and bicycle injury lawyer down in Clearwater, but I represent clients throughout Florida. If I can ever be of help to you, don't hesitate to call with anything that we can help. There's never a fee to talk. So we will see you next time. And Dale, we'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jim.
All right. Bye-bye.